Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau from Compassionate Cooks. I founded Compassionate Cooks to empower people to make informed food choices and to debunk myths about vegetarianism and animal rights. You can learn more about who we are and what we do by visiting our websites, compassionatecooks.com or joyofveganbaking.com. I am so excited to tell you that we now have an official Compassionate Cooks Food for Thought podcast message board. I am so excited. It's not even funny. We've done a short little test run, so some listeners have already signed up and you can start meeting each other right away. I mentioned doing something like this in the last episode and realized right away that we needed to do this pronto. So it took a little time, but it's there. And if you visit compassionatecooks.com and scroll over the top menu that says podcast, you'll see a link to the message board there. Also, if you click on podcast or listen to our podcast from the main page, you'll notice a brand new podcast page that should help better explain the podcast to newbies, enable you to subscribe to the podcast and get email notifications of new episodes. And you can even download the theme music, which was created by my husband and his band, and he laughed when I showed him the link for the music file, and he said he'd be amazed if one person clicked on it. But I told him that I've heard from many of you who wanted the music, which is adorable. So anyway, I should give his band a plug. I haven't talked about his band. They're really awesome. The name of his band is Gösta Berling. It's an old Swedish silent film with Greta Garbo, and we're really into silent films, and Damon, the lead singer, is really into silent film stars, and most of the songs are about silent film stars. And Gösta Berling is spelled G-O-S-T-A, first word, Gösta, and Berling, B-E-R-L-I-N-G, is the name of the band. And we're probably completely ruining the pronunciation, but there it is. They don't have a website up yet, but they will. They have a MySpace page, which is myspace.com/Garden of Allah, and it also references an old silent film star. It's one of their songs. So Garden of ALLAH. So myspace.com/Garden of Allah. And I'll put this link up on the message board because I can. So you can hear samples of their songs on their MySpace page. You can go to cabinlife.org, CABINLIF as in Frank, .org, cabinlife.org, and you can hear the songs there. You can hear much better recordings there, and you can check out some video of their recent gigs. David's the really cute guitar player. He's not the lead singer. He plays guitar too, the lead singer does, but David's the other guitar player, not the bassist. He's the guitar player, but it's really sad because he's always off to the side or in the dark in the photos and videos, so you can't really even see him, but he's a rock star, and I'm so proud of these guys. And the few gigs that they've done so far have been fundraisers for the San Francisco AIDS Foundation annual bike ride that goes from San Francisco to Los Angeles to raise money for the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, which provides support services to people with HIV and AIDS. And so it's a really awesome foundation, and it's a really awesome band. So check them out and check out the message boards, register, start talking to each other. I did this for you. I've created a number of different forums. I've broken the forums up by state. Now, I realize this is a pretty broad categorization, but I'm relying on you to send shout outs to each other, to find people who live closer to you. And then as we find situations where one particular city has a big draw, we can break that city out into its own forum. The options are endless. And again, there are broad categorizations. We have, Canada, which I realize is pretty big. We can break that up too into region. We have Australia, New Zealand, and then all the other continents, just little continents: Europe, Asia, South America, Africa. I forgot Antarctica. So if there are any vegans in Antarctica there out listening to the podcast, then just let me know and I'll add a category for you too. So check out the message board. I'm so excited, and I'll see you there. So I hope you're all doing well. Thank you to everyone who has left comments about this podcast at iTunes and elsewhere. I've seen some really sweet comments on Podcast Alley. If you go to podcastalley.com and you type in vegetarian Food for Thought will come up on the list, and you can leave comments there which inspire other people to listen. And you can also vote, and the more votes a podcast has, the higher the podcast ranks, which means more people will learn about it. So thank you for taking a few minutes to do that. support. Also, as I've said before, I encourage you to please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. If you go to compassionatecooks.com, click on listen to the podcast, you'll see a number of options. And like I said, you can also subscribe just via email so you can get email notifications. But thank you very much for that. I want to send a shout out to today's sponsor, Ryan Adams. Hi, Ryan, who is a regular generous sponsor of this podcast. And I am very, very grateful for his support. He, like all of the sponsors, make it possible to even do this podcast. I certainly would not be able to do it as frequently as I'm doing it. So we can all be grateful for Ryan and for the other sponsors. Ironically, I quoted Ryan before I knew who he was. I don't know if you remember, but in the episode called The High Cost of Cheap Meat, I talked about an article on MSN Money called Go Vegetarian to Save Money. And Ryan, who's a dietitian and exercise physiologist with the Johns Hopkins Weight Management Center in Baltimore, was interviewed for that article. And he was already a podcast listener when he heard me quote him in that episode. So it was really funny. It's a very small world. So thank you very much, Ryan. You should know by now how much I appreciate your support. And if you have appreciated the increased frequency of the podcast, or if you have gotten anything out of the podcast at all, perhaps you would consider sponsoring the podcast. You can visit compassionatecooks.com, click on support our podcast, and it gives you a rundown of benefits that you receive as a thank you. But the main thing is that you're helping me to empower people with vital information for leaving animals off their plates. It also supports such things as the new message board and other things that I have in mind to make this a really great and powerful community. So thank you for whatever you can do. Also, if you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at podcast@compassionatecooks.com. I love hearing from you, and I welcome topic suggestions as well. Today's topic has been requested by a number of people, so it was time to prioritize it. A lot of people ask me about traveling as a vegan. And in fact, when you talk to non-vegetarians and they start to ponder vegetarianism or veganism, one of the things they tend to say after, isn't it hard to get your protein? And after, what do you eat? And after, but animals were meant to be eaten, isn't it hard to travel as a vegan? So there's a lot to talk about here, and I hope I can give you some practical tips based on my own experience and based on what I've seen and heard from other people. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It is not a perfect world, and truth be told, eating vegan is easy in most places and a little challenging in others. And I'll try and give you some general tips, but really it just takes some preparation and forethought. But this brings me back to something I said long ago. Everyone should be putting forethought into what they put in their mouth, even when they're traveling, even if they're not vegan. It's like we're on this conveyor belt, just shoving crap into our mouths nonstop. And so, yeah, I'm a proponent for taking some time to prepare for the meals we eat, both at home and when we're on the road. So let's talk about air travel first. Let's talk about what your options are. If I'm going on a domestic flight or flying with an airline that does not serve meals, I do. I just bring snacks or sandwiches with me on the plane. I tend to eat also before I leave the house for the airport because I'm one of those people who gets cranky when I get hungry. Ask my husband. I'm very predictable in that way. If I am cranky, it's usually just because I'm hungry or I haven't had tea in a couple hours. So I usually try to curtail this disaster for myself and for my husband by making sure my belly's full when I leave for the airport. I usually cut up some carrots and celery to bring with me. I bring some bagged walnuts. I bring some apples, bananas, some dates. And, I'm not a big fan of the bars like the Cliff bars and such, but I'll buy a few for this occasion to stave off any hunger that might arise. It's, that's fine. My preference is the bar that Cliff Bar makes. It's called Nectar. I don't know if you've seen this, but they're just made from dates. They're just dates. And there's a couple different flavors, but my favorite's the dates, almond, apricot, and cranberries. That's it. That's all that's in the bar. And I think like some fruit juice like as a sweetener, but that's it. And it's really yummy and it does the trick. So I'll buy some bars as well, which I think is really helpful. One of the things I hate about flying is that you can't bring your own bottles anymore. I used to bring my stainless steel container with, full of water or tea that I would use for whatever trip I was on, because I really try to avoid buying bottled water as much as possible. So whatever, I don't buy bottled water. I don't bring it with me. So I take a few sips from the water fountain, when I'm at the airport waiting for the plane. And then when I get on the plane, I get some water there, but I usually ask for a refill using the same cup that they just gave me water in. I'm just always amazed at how much waste one flight creates. So I just, I try to use that cup as much as possible. And the last thing I bring on the plane with me without fail is my tea. I have quite the setup when I'm flying, much to the envy of the passengers around me, I'm sure, who are just eating the crappy crap that the airlines serve. I drink loose green tea, and so I always have a container of tea with me and my little spoon strainer, which is full of tea, and then I just stick that little spoon strainer into hot water, and I have my tea with me on a flight, and if I have my tea with me on a flight, I'm just the happiest camper in the world. That's all I need, really, just my tea and my laptop and a book and a banana, but that's it. That's all I need, and I'm happy. So take whatever with you on your journey that's going to make it pleasant for you. Hello, just, take what you need. But let's say you're on a flight that does offer a meal. I still bring snacks with me, usually, but make arrangements beforehand to get the vegan meal. I have never been unsatisfied, honestly, by a vegan meal on a plane. I'm serious. But and different carriers are different. On Continental, I've enjoyed Amy's Organics, the Amy's Organics burritos or fajitas, a decent enough salad, Sunflower Baking Company's vegan cookies. I've also enjoyed some really good Indian meals, and I'm noticing that most vegan options tend to be Indian, and some have been really, really good. The worst thing that could happen is that they lose your vegan meal request or it didn't go through. And I have written my fair share of letters to the airlines urging them to make vegetarian food the default and make people who want meat ask for that as a special meal. And I'm serious. It would be immensely cheaper for the airline, assuming they prepare the meal themselves and don't buy Amy's Organics, which is obviously more expensive, but most airlines prepare this food themselves. And that way everybody could eat. It's just like when I've been at weddings where people who are sitting at our table or, like when I'm on the plane and someone's sitting next to me, they didn't think to order vegetarian. They didn't think to ask for the vegetarian option. And they're really jealous when we're eating the vegetarian food. I'm like, oh, if I had known, I would have gotten the vegetarian option. I think if it was more prevalent for people, they would choose vegetarian over animals. That's what I think. So at one airline I was on recently, I can't remember which one it was. They were selling snack boxes. They weren't serving food. And the snack boxes had different themes. And one of the themes was the healthy choice box. And I looked at the list of things in the healthy choice box, and it was turkey or chicken or egg, something ridiculous. And I said, do you have any salad? Just do you have any vegetables? And he said, no, but you could, pick the chicken out of the, so whatever. So anyway, that was their healthy choice box. So order the vegan meal. Some airlines call it strict vegetarian. Some call it Hindu non-dairy. Just contact the airline that you're flying on to find out your options. And call the night before to confirm. I found that's also really helpful, even though in our accounts with Continental, it already comes up that we're strict vegetarian or vegan or whatever they call it. But I always call the night before to just confirm. It's always safe to do that. Several months ago, I received an email from a listener who was just distraught by an experience she had while traveling. And it near broke my heart to read it because she had had such an unpleasant experience, but was also being really hard on herself. She explained that she was flying back from the Pacific to Europe over a period of almost 2 days in the air. And the airlines lost her vegan meal request. And, well, I'll read her words. She said, I found myself starving and being served food that most surely had been prepared with eggs, butter, or milk. Customs restrictions on food items meant I couldn't really take my own dried fruits or nuts whilst traveling between countries. Much to my despair and internal suffering, I found myself with little choice but to knowingly eat vegetarian but non-vegan food or starve for the following 20 hours. The feeling of guilt was enormous. I had broken my own standards, and I no longer was the pure, perfect vegan I am able to be back at home. Now, there may be times when you are desperate and you have no other option but to eat bread or crackers that may very well have animal products in them, or nuts that may be coated with honey or something like that. And you have to make that decision yourself. But might I offer that if being perfect or pure is your goal, then you will most likely fail or feel really bad. But if avoiding causing pain and suffering to others to the degree that it's possible is your goal, then just keep your eye on the big big picture. I'm so sorry that listener had to endure that. So, write your letters to the airlines, encourage them to make plant-based meals more of the norm, encourage them to be more conscious of non-meat eaters, but I also encourage you to not beat yourself up so much for doing the best you can. Really, it's not going to do us any good to do that. Before I leave this section on air travel, it's worth mentioning that some airports are better than others when it comes to vegan food. I think the only time I've eaten at Taco Bell in the last several years was at the Houston airport, but it was good enough. Houston always has Subway, and there's lots of other restaurants we could have gone to. We've gotten Subway subs. I think they have one just called the vegetable sub sandwich, and we just ask for no mayonnaise or whatever, and just make sure. I think it's mustard and oil and vinegar, and it's decent enough. It's vegetables, whatever. It's decent enough for airport food. I'm not looking for a gourmet meal when I go to the airport. I certainly don't expect the kind of food I'm making at home. You kind of lower your standards a little bit. And I also think at the Houston airport, there was a Chinese restaurant. We were able to get a stir fry out, a spring roll, rice, and we had a really good burrito at the Portland airport just recently. So, there's lots of options. Incidentally, PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, www.pcrm.org, puts out a list every year of the airports with the best vegan options. If you visit pcrm.org and type in airport in their search box, you'll get results that include the airport ranking for the last few years. You'll see each year there. I don't think they did 2007 yet, but you'll see 2006. And if you check it out yourself, you can see their criteria, the criteria they use. I think they evaluate 13 of the busiest airports. And here's a little summary. I'm not going to give you all of them. It would take too long. But amazingly, Orlando International Airport ranked the highest of the ones that they ranked. Apparently, you could find gazpacho focaccia at Fresh Attractions Deli. You could find vegetarian rice and noodle dishes at Zing's Noodlery, the vegetarian purse with couscous tofu, and roasted peppers at McCoy's Bar and Grill. Macaroni Grill has a create-your-own pasta thing, which offers low-fat options, they say, such as tomato sauce, broccoli, mushrooms, onions, and peppers. Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport tied for second with San Francisco International Airport. Hello, Detroit and San Francisco tied. There's grilled vegetable sandwich at Max and Irma's at the Detroit Airport, the vegetarian stir-fried Mediterranean Grill, the seaweed salad and veggie sushi at Musashi. So there's lots of stuff there in Detroit. Who knew? In San Francisco, there actually are a lot of really healthful choices at that airport. There's the Asian noodle salad at Guava and Java, smoky split pea soup at San Francisco Soup Company, curried vegetables and rice at Harbor Village Kitchen. So I'll put all the stuff up on the message board so that you can see all these. I can put this on the message board now because we have a message board. I'm just really excited, and I'm just going to keep saying that. But pretty much most airports have decent enough options. So check out the list for yourself. It's really helpful to know when you're at the airport and your plane is delayed or you want to grab some food for the plane, which is a really good tip. Go to the airport and get something at the airport, and then you can just bring it on the plane with you, because once you go through customs and once you go through the checkpoint, you can bring whatever you want on the plane. Here's some general tips. I have to be really honest with you. Completely separate from being vegan, when I'm traveling, I get really tired of eating in restaurants. I realize that might sound really silly to some of you, but I guess I'm not the average traveler. But my husband feels the same way. It's like nice to have dinner made for me, believe me, but restaurant food is just so much richer than what I'm used to eating at home, and I just get tired of it. And the both of us, when we travel, the first thing we talk about going home, besides seeing our cats, is that we can't wait to have a salad, a salad like the way we like the salad. And I'm sure some of you can identify with that. We're such creatures of habit. We like things a certain way. And so it's always nice to be able to prepare the dishes you like, exactly as you like them when you get home. Now, depending on where we go and how long we go for, when we can, I do like getting places that have a little kitchen, places to stay that have a little kitchenette or something. And I know that sounds totally nutty because you think I'd relax on vacation, but it's actually really hard for me to do. But it's not just that. I genuinely like to cook. And it gets really expensive if you're eating every meal out when you're traveling. So that's just a little bit of advice. If you can find a little kitchenette when you're traveling, I remember a few years ago when we were in London, we were in this little suite, little boutique hotel. And when I say suite and little and boutique, I mean tiny. And so, I enjoy my smoothies every morning, my fruit smoothies. But come winter, I do tend to eat oatmeal for breakfast more often than a cold smoothie. And so I brought my oats, my quick cooking oats, like all the way to England with me. I brought dates and I brought some walnuts and some apples. Yeah, we had like a suitcase just full of food when we were going to England. And I guess I got cinnamon or something from the little restaurant. And I used the hot pot to boil the water. And I enjoyed my favorite breakfast almost every day. But it was really funny because we barely had any room at all for anything. And I took up most of the prime real estate on the dresser with my breakfast fixings. But it was worth it for me to do that. It just made me feel good. And as wonderful as travel is, it can be really, kind of tiring, like exhausting and jarring to your routine. So I like doing things that make me feel grounded when I'm traveling. And making my oatmeal every morning was one of those things. So I was happy to do it. And unless you've eaten there as a vegan, you may not know that London is one of the most wonderful places to eat vegan. Everyone thinks it's because of the Indian restaurants, but that's not the case. I, in fact, don't remember even eating at one Indian restaurant while we were there. And though there are wonderful Indian restaurants, lots of vegetarian options there, I don't think we ate in any of them, but people tend to forget that vegetarianism as an ethical movement started in the United Kingdom, particularly in England, and we had absolutely no problem finding fantastic vegetarian restaurants wherever we went. There was The Gate, and I'll give you these websites, but I'll also put them on the message board, thegate.tv, which was kind of like like industrial chic, kind of nicer restaurant with a nicer menu, and we went there for David's birthday. We ate at a restaurant called Mana Restaurant, which is the oldest vegetarian restaurant in the UK, and that was really, really good. We ate at this really awesome place called The Place Below, which was definitely more casual, kind of cafeteria style setup, but the food was just total comfort food, really fresh, really delicious. And the restaurant itself, it was all vegetarian. The restaurant was vegetarian. The restaurant itself is in the crypt of this old church. The website is theplacebelow.co.uk. And it was just the coolest location with like huge ceilings and stone walls and pillars and really beautiful space. Mary LeBeau Church in Cheapside, and just one of the most memorable places for delicious food. One of the most memorable places for the food that we ate was this all-you-can-eat buffet, ridiculously low prices. It was a restaurant called Thai Food, TAI Food, and I believe it's a chain. So there's like Thai food in a couple of different locations. There's Thai noodle, Thai buffet, all Chinese, all vegetarian Chinese and Thai. Just ridiculously cheap and delicious and stuffed. Like we ate like nobody needs to eat as much as we did that day. It was just ridiculous. So that's there. And the coolest thing was when we were in Highgate, it's kind of like North London. We were about to go on a walking tour and we were really rushed to find something because the tube was broken, not going north. The tube was just not going north. And so it took us 2 hours to get there by bus, and it should have taken us like 20 minutes or something. And I'm still bitter because we were supposed to go see Keith's house. Anyway, we were in this like huge rush and we heard about a vegetarian restaurant that was up there. And wouldn't you know, in the middle of this like park, like a public park, like kids were playing soccer, park trees, park. And then there was like this restaurant, this adorable vegetarian restaurant with an outdoor patio surrounded by trees, and it was just awesome. So, you just never know what's going to like come upon you. And we ate at a couple, pizza restaurants there. We were on the go and got cheeseless pizzas. It was just not a problem at all. London is like one of the most vegan friendly cities in the world, period. Now, parts of Florida, not so much. The entire state of Montana, not so much. I'm just teasing. I've never been anywhere in Montana. I'm sure there's a nice restaurant in Montana where you can get some vegetables. But my point is that, some places are harder than others. And I realize that. I don't know if I ever told you the story of visiting Florida to see my father. Lordy, lordy, lordy. My father, unfortunately, recently moved to Florida. And I say unfortunately because when we go home to New Jersey to see our families, now like he's not there and I have to go all the way to Florida. And he's outside of Tampa, like in the suburb, but that's all of Florida anyway. And I will contain any opinions I have about the sprawl we saw all over Florida, or the Hummers we saw all over the place, or the strip malls that went on for miles and miles. We definitely felt out of our element when we were there. Anyway, as I said, I will refraining. Okay. So for the most part, eating outside of Tampa, eating in Tampa was fine. We ate mostly at my dad's house, but we did venture out, and there's a vegan restaurant in Tampa called the Grass Root, which is this groovy little place. It was mostly raw, mostly organic, if not all organic. And they had fantastic veggie burgers, fantastic salads, delicious almond milk that I watched them make. Really fresh, really good food. The website is www.thegrassrootlife, L-I-F as in Frank, life.com. So that was really awesome. And I can't remember where else we ate, but like it was fine. So that was a good part. But David's parents were also in Florida the same time we were, but they were on like the East Coast and we, I guess, were on the West Coast. So we decided to meet halfway, which was still about like a 2.5 hour drive for each of us, right? And we met at this really cool place called the Bach Sanctuary, which is this really beautiful place full of gardens and woods and a really gorgeous stone tower, all of which was built by this guy named Edward Bach, B-O-K. And one of the most unique things about this place is the carillon bells situated high up in the tower, and they play this carillon concert every hour on the hour. A carillon is this really unique instrument consisting of bells that are like arranged in a chromatic series, but they're played from a keyboard, and the sound is controlled by variations of touch on the keyboard. Really beautiful sound. So it's a really nice place that we, like in the middle of nowhere, that we enjoyed. We enjoyed the day and spent the day there on the grounds. And they had a cafe, which, you're thinking like at a tourist spot, you're not really going to find anything good. And we had a really lovely lunch. It was like really beautiful salad and roasted potatoes and a nice soup and surprisingly good food. But we had spent several hours at this place, which again, by the way, is bachsanctuary.org. BOK sanctuary.org. And we had spent several hours at this place. We had done lunch and it was like closing and it was time for dinner and the cafe was closed at this point. And so we had to go find somewhere else to eat. So I thought I would ask the information booth that was filled with very sweet docents, and I asked where they might suggest we eat. And we told them we were looking for a restaurant with vegetarian options. And she named some place with like grill in the title of the restaurant. And I looked at her skeptically, and she was really cute because she started saying, oh, no, they definitely have vegetarian options there. You just ask for what you want. You ask them to prepare something special for you. You look for vegetables on the menu. And it was just really adorable because she just went on giving me advice about how to eat vegetarian in a restaurant. It was really, really cute. So, but I thought okay, well, grill back in California generally refers to vegetables, or at least it does so in my little vegan world, in my little vegan brain. And so, all right, maybe it's okay. But just to be sure, we used my mother-in-law's little thingamajiggy to scout out restaurants in the area based on cuisine. So a Chinese restaurant came up, and as you know, if you can find a non-American restaurant, you're usually good to go. Now, the hardest part of all of this is that we were in two separate cars. So my in-laws, who would have been happy going to the grill place, they got in their car and we got in our car, a rental car, following them. And I just wanted to check out the Chinese place first. I just, wanted to see if this was somewhere we can eat. So they, use their little navigator thingy to find the place. And when we came upon the address, we pretty much got out of there as quickly as possible. It was really sketchy. There were bars on the window, totally isolated area. Really scary. So we decided to find this grill place after all. So we got in the car and started following them to that grill place. Now, on the way to the grill place, we spot a Pizza Hut and another pizza restaurant nearby. And David's like, we ought to just go to Pizza Hut. And I said, there is no way I'm going to a Pizza Hut. And I don't know who I think I was, thinking I was going to find something better than a Pizza Hut in the middle of nowhere. So we finally arrive at this grill place, which was like 10 or 15 more minutes, maybe 15 more minutes from the pizza places that we spotted. And David and I parked first, and we got out and we, squeezed past the 20 people waiting, and we grabbed a menu. And I swear to God, there was not one vegetable dish on the menu. It was just full of poor animal carcasses and just crap. I mean, just cream sauces and crap. And I swear the only vegetable on the menu were the fried onions that top the steak. I'm not kidding. Now, I realize that at this point, many of you would have just gotten in line and did the best you could. And I say, good for you. I'm sure there was a way to get a salad with just oil and vinegar or French fries or something, bend with the breeze and all that. But I'm sorry, it was just so upsetting. It was just people gorging themselves on these animals and their secretions, and I just couldn't do it. It was too decadent. And let me tell you something, those people in line had no business being there either. They all looked really unhealthy. One couple came out with an oxygen tank. I swear to God, he was like pulling an oxygen tank behind him and like had a mask. I mean, not a good place for people to eat. So I realized that I live in a bit of a bubble in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I really got a taste of what many of you are going through. So I'm just chalking up my experience in Florida like as research. As noble as it would have been to stay, I couldn't. And I didn't want to be a pain, but by this time, unfortunately, my in-laws had gotten out of the car, they parked, and I very quickly made the announcement that there was no way I was going to eat there. And I was really sorry. So we got back in our cars and we made our way back to the Pizza Hut. But first I wanted to just hop out and check out that other pizza place, which was just a couple of doors down from the hut. So I figured, pizza, no cheese, no problem. I've done that a million times. Well, apparently this was a special pizza place that specialized in flavored cheese crust. All of the crust was made with butter and cheese. I know what pizza crust is. Authentic pizza crust, I make it frequently. You need neither butter nor cheese in the crust. So alas, we went to Pizza Hut. Now we get to Pizza Hut and I'm just completely exhausted. I felt like I had been through the trenches, We sat down just utterly exhausted from our journey. I'm thanking my in-laws profusely and apologizing. And the waitress, came over to take our order, and David and I ordered a pizza with tons of vegetables. We confirmed that there was no cheese in the sauce, and there wasn't. And so I asked for a pizza with no cheese. And I'm not kidding. I think her head completely spun around on her shoulders. It was really impressive. Now, dear listeners, I am not one to suggest that we give any other reason than the truth when we're asking for what we want. I am not one to say, I'm allergic to cheese, I'm allergic to dairy, because I think the ethical argument is strong enough, right? I don't have to make anything up. But when she looked at me in horror, I kind of playfully said, look, I'll die if I have any cheese. Just make sure I have no cheese. And I was being facetious, but I was like really hungry and tired at this point. I didn't want to fight for cheeseless pizza. And she was like, no problem. Assured us that the breadsticks or the whatever you stick in the tomato sauce at Pizza Hut, she made sure that they had no cheese. She said she would make us a separate batch to make sure. But here's the best part. She came over again a few minutes later, confirming that like everything we ordered had no cheese. I think we ordered a salad too. She made sure it had no cheese. And she was super accommodating. And then the manager came over and he assured us that nothing we ordered had cheese. And did we need anything else? And he treated us like royalty at Pizza Hut. Now, granted, he didn't want a liability lawsuit on his hands, but still, it was awesome at Pizza Hut. So, the lesson, drastic circumstances call for drastic measures. And we have photos in front of Pizza Hut proving that we were there. So not exactly somewhere I'd ever go unless desperate. And we were desperate, but it actually wound up being a pretty decent enough meal. It was like lots of veggies and bread and salad. Pizza Hut. Who knew? We shouldn't have gone there in the first place. Now, I know some naysayers would say, see, this is exactly why I wouldn't want to be vegan. It's a hassle. You have to drive all over creation to find what you're looking for. You have to eat at Pizza Hut. You have to make restaurants go out of their way to accommodate you, blah, blah, blah. Now, I guess my response would be, well, I don't know. What's the alternative? Be responsible for the torture and suffering and anguish of living beings. Be responsible for being part of the most violent industry for both humans and animals in the world versus what? Having a little adventure versus being a little inconvenienced. In the grand scheme of things, I want to look back on my life and know that I had my priorities straight, that I put my money where my mouth is, that I walked the walk, that I was true to what I believed in. I mean, that's going to mean a hell of a lot more to me than having the privilege of eating in a restaurant like the Grizzly Grill or whatever the name of it was, since that would have been our only option anyway. We were in the middle of nowhere. So what do I take away from that experience? Well, first of all, don't go to Florida. Okay, I mean, that's a lesson that I have definitely gotten out of it. I'm just kidding. I mean, unfortunately, David's not going back. He said, next time I go, I'm on my own. So I'm going to have to go to Florida again soon. But now I'm more prepared, and there's actually a website I'm going to name in a little bit that'll help you be more prepared if you go to Florida, especially the Tampa Bay area. But, Some places are easier than others. And again, I think planning in advance really helps. Having bars and snacks with you for those situations, I think would have been really helpful if I had had some snacks with us. I think we should treat ourselves as adults the way parents treat their kids. They would never leave the house without having snacks or food or water or beverages with them because they know what will happen when the kids get hungry. It'll be a disaster, like when I get hungry. Not a good thing. So let's honor that in us too. But even if you're not vegan, I mean, there are times when you're just on the road and out and about and you might not have access to food. So it's always good to have some food, some snacks and stuff with you. Okay. So planning ahead is definitely helpful, and there are really fantastic resources online to help you do this. The biggest, most comprehensive website out there for this purpose is happycow.net. Happycow.net. You can search by city or state or browse using the map they have, and you'll find reviews for restaurants and health food stores all over the place internationally. But keep in mind that this website really relies on reviews from people like you and me. So if you discover a place like a Pizza Hut that's veg friendly or vegan or vegetarian, definitely take a few minutes to go to happycow.net and write a review. You'll be helping somebody else. You'll make it easier for them to find what they're looking for when they're traveling. There's also vegdining.com. And if you go to vegcooking.com and click on the dining out menu option in the top menu, there's a ton of really great information. There's vegan eating on the road and vegetarian friendly restaurant guide. And in vegan eating on the road, there's a chain restaurants guide. So you too can have the kind of experience that we had at Pizza Hut, but it shows all the different vegan options at the chain restaurants and it's helpful. Another good online resource is yelp.com, Yelp, www.yelp, Y-E-L-P as in Paul.com. And there's restaurant reviews and all sorts of reviews there. And again, it's really based on the community. And while you're there, would you consider doing a search for compassionate cooks and then just writing a quick review? You can review the cooking classes, you can review the podcast, you can review the cookbook or the DVD or the website, whatever you want to say about compassionate cooks. But it's a really popular site and I have only a few reviews on there, and your review would help to spread the word. So I really appreciate it. Another really good resource are these new vegcity.com websites that activists are building all over the place. And you can do this. You know, people ask all the time what they can do to be helpful. Well, whether or not you have website building skills, I mean, you can use just a kind of a template kind of thing, or if you have website building skills, you can build these websites that basically give tons of resources for people in your city about the veg friendliness of restaurants and services in your city. So here are some of the sites. And again, I'll put this up on the message board. There's vegohio.com, vegillinois.com, vegsf as in San Francisco, vegtampabay.com, vegseattle.com, vegportland.com, vegaustin.com, vegalbany.com, vegbaltimore, vegchicago, vegdc, vegdetroit.com, veghawaii.org, it's the only .org on the list, vegkansascity.com, vegmadison, as in Madison, Wisconsin, vegphilly as in Philadelphia.com, vegphilly.com, vegsandiego.com, and vegsarasota.com. Lots of great stuff, lots of great information. And I think the organization Mercy for Animals is involved in helping set up a number of these sites, but I'm sure anybody who built any of these sites would be happy to help you get started. So definitely check them out and venture forth. Now, I want to talk a little bit about international travel. I received an email from a listener many months ago who wrote, "My name is Jacqueline." Hi, Jacqueline. And after getting hooked, perhaps that's not the best choice of a metaphor, on the Vegetarian Food for Thought podcast, I became vegetarian and then quickly moved into veganism. And I absolutely love it. People always view vegetarianism and especially veganism from the outside as a purely restrictive way of living. But from the inside, that couldn't be further from the truth. Becoming vegan has only seemed to open up the world of food and health, and it makes the relationship between the body and nourishment such a more intimate and exciting connection. I've never been so excited about cooking either. I never cared for cooking before, but now one of my favorite things to do is to find new vegan recipes and make meals for friends. So if it isn't obvious enough, I love the vegan lifestyle. My potential problem, however, is that I'm going to teach in Honduras for a year, and I'm concerned about being able to stay vegan in another culture where the stores probably won't be stocked with 10 varieties of soy and almond milk, tofu and tempeh, etc. I'm not sure if this is something you can help with, but I guess I'm wondering what you would do in this situation. I'm also wondering what vitamins and minerals vegans need to be particularly careful about getting enough of. I have another vegetarian friend who was wondering some of the same things as she was planning a trip to Eastern Europe. Very neglectfully, I wasn't able to respond in time before she left, partly because I knew I wanted to cover this topic in a podcast episode and I knew it would take a long time to write because I had a lot to say, obviously. So by the time I wrote to her, as I feared, she had already been in Honduras for a while, and she wrote back, very graciously forgiving my delayed response, and said the following. I've been in Honduras for about a month now, and I was actually going to write back to you and tell you some of the observations and lessons I've learned from just figuring it out myself. Living abroad as a vegan has taught me something I might have taken much longer to learn in the United States, and that is to be a whole foods centered vegan. In the US, it's rather easy to be a vegan and still pretend like you're not, with all the meat substitutes and fake cheese and veggie burgers. But in another country where they don't have as much of that stuff, you're forced to turn to the fresh produce and the natural ingredients, and all countries have those. I eat tons of salad loaded with a whole tomato and a whole cucumber, radishes, carrots, and beans, and instead of a fancy expensive vegan dressing I can only get in the States, I use the juice from half my lime on my salad, and it's so much more delicious. It's funny that I worried about being vegan abroad because it really should have been obvious to me that every country has tons of native produce, and it's fun to taste and learn to cook with new fruits and veggies. Every country also has their own grains and beans, and usually all the native food is the cheapest stuff too. It's somewhat difficult to dine out, but I just make the mainstay of my diet food I cook myself, and then I just muddle through a restaurant menu on the occasions that I do go out. I also found it helpful to learn how to say things like without meat or without cheese or vegetarian. Many don't have a word for vegan, or the names of fruits and veggies in the language of the country so you can ask for things at restaurants, etc. I think I'm probably eating the healthiest and tastiest vegan diet I ever have. Traveling or living abroad vegan definitely does change your diet, but if you go prepared to simplify your taste buds and get down to the whole foods diet that is actually best for you, that change is only for the better. Love it, love it, love it. That's what I've been saying all along. Base your diet on whole foods. And what Jacqueline is experiencing in Honduras is exactly what I experienced in Italy. And I'll get back to that in a second. But just to address Jacqueline's question about supplementation, here in the US, a lot of people rely on fortified foods, fortified tofu and cereals and non-dairy milks, etc., which is where some nutrients are coming from. But these fortified foods may not be available in other countries. But just as I recommend, as you do here in the US, take a daily multivitamin for insurance purposes, as well as a B12 tablet once a week, I would recommend the same when you're abroad, especially if you're going to be gone for a longer period of time. I also recommend bringing flax seeds with you. You can grind them up first if you like, just refrigerate them as soon as possible, and continue to take the 1 tablespoon of ground flax seeds a day to get your omega-3 fatty acids. So that's that. But after a recent trip to Italy, I decided to document what I experienced in terms of eating on my Food for Thought blog, and you can access that through the Compassionate Cooks website. But I'll share some thoughts with you here now. Some of this may apply to your experience traveling, some may not, but please take what works for you and just leave the rest. The first thing I found was that it wasn't really helpful to say, I'm vegetarian in Italian, because they just look at you like, and so what's your point? And it's kind of silly because though vegetarian is vegetariano in Italian, vegan is vegetariano with an L. Like that's stupid because you can't even hear the difference. And they didn't know what I was talking about anyway. So I learned very quickly that it was more effective to order what I wanted and then confirm that what I ordered did not have butter or cheese or eggs. Now, there were quite a few things that I think make Italy stand out, and I realize this won't always apply to every place you visit, but it will apply to some. Now, for instance, Spain, they put cut up pigs in everything, and they think nothing of serving animal-based broth to a vegetarian, even after you've told them you don't want any animals. So Spain may very well be the most difficult place to be vegetarian, but it's not impossible. Anyway, I digress. So one of the things that I was most impressed with about restaurants in Italy is that every single item on the menu was accompanied by a description of what that dish was, of what it contained. So for instance, if the dish was something like white beans and tomato sauce, underneath it might say something like beans, olive oil, tomatoes, garlic, and basil. If it was bruschetta, underneath it, it would say olive oil, garlic, and salt, like in Italian or in English. And so you knew exactly what you were getting. It was amazing. I'd order something like the white beans, and I would just say, no formaggio, vero? No cheese, right? And the waiter would be like, yeah, no, like it doesn't say it on the menu, so why would you think it would be there? That's what it was like. I'm moving to Italy. I think Compassionate Cooks could easily operate out of Italy. Don't you think? Like, I'm serious. I really want to move to Italy. Also, as I just implied, and I think Jacqueline said this, it wasn't helpful only to know the Italian words for fruits and vegetables and beans. It was actually more helpful to know the words for meat, fish, cheese, butter, eggs, and milk. I just found that really valuable since it was more effective to say no latte rather than sono vegetariano, rather than I'm vegetarian. Does that make sense? So I'm with Jacqueline. Just, once you get to know the foods native to the region you're in, it's a lot easier. We found soya milk all over the place. We actually found almond milk more easily than soy, and which is not surprising because almond milk dates back to Roman times. And we had, some almond milk for our cereal every morning. And, again, some people might say, well, you're missing out on all of the pastries that Italians eat for breakfast. And A, like, that's not what I want for breakfast. B, I don't care. And C, I don't care. Like, it's not a sacrifice for me to be vegan. It's just a matter of living consistently. So I don't see it as my missing out on anything. I experience abundance and I experience joy at my options and my choices. I'm tickled that being vegan is considered a dietary restriction or that someone who's vegan has dietary limitations. I don't have limitations. I don't have restrictions. I have choices. I have options. I have abundance. And let me tell you something. Every non-vegetarian I know has some kind of food issue. I know a number of non-vegetarians who don't like vegetables. That's a pretty huge category of food to not like, or who don't like tomatoes, or who likes tomatoes raw, but they don't like tomatoes cooked, or who won't eat beans, they won't eat green beans, but they'll eat other kinds. I mean, I realize we all have our idiosyncrasies, but frankly, every vegan I know has a much more expansive palate than any non-vegetarian I know. And I'm talking about kids too. Every vegan kid I know loves everything from Brussels sprouts to olives to beets to broccoli, but non-vegetarian kids, picky, picky, picky. That's all I'm seeing. I mean, that's what I see. I could be wrong. Now, I won't get into any more nitty-gritty details about Italy, more than I have. And, again, I'm not telling you all of this just to share my experience, in Italy, even though I'm happy to do that. It's because I'm hoping you can translate some of my experience to make it useful for you. And visit the Food for Thought blog for more restaurant names and lots of detailed tips. But I will say this, and I think I mentioned this place in my Peace for Pigs episode, and it's worth mentioning again. In the Umbria region, we stayed at a place called Montali Country House. Montali, Montali, Montali Country House, montalionline.com, montalionline.com. We were served a gourmet vegan breakfast every morning and a gourmet vegan dinner every night. Its location is very central to lots of just beautiful medieval Umbrian towns, and the property itself is breathtaking. I highly recommend this place. If you're going to that region, if you're going to go to like Tuscany and Umbria, tell them Colleen from Compassionate Cooks sent you. They're a vegetarian place and they tend to charge extra for vegan. But see what you can do. Tell them you're a friend of Compassionate Cooks. I can't make any promises, but talk to them. The hosts, the owners are Alberto and Manu, and they were born to do this work. They bought the land 20 years ago and they built almost everything. I think they built everything from scratch, including planting the 25 acres of olive trees on the property. They built all of the buildings, the stone building. They're all stone from the stones that were on the property. And the view is breathtaking. The food is divine. Chefs who train at the most highly regarded culinary schools come here to Montali to learn. It's just amazing, and I wish we could have stayed longer. We also met the most wonderful couple who live in Wales when we were there, and we've stayed in touch with them since. And it was really an incredible experience. There's also private cooking classes, which we did when we were there. So we will definitely return. There's one more email I want to share with you that I just love from a woman named Debbie, and I think you'll love it too. She wrote, thank you for your terrific podcast. I've been a vegetarian for about 6 weeks. It's been a slow, long process to get to this point. I've always been a picky meat eater. See, another picky eater. Never eating veal or rabbit, more fish than chicken. But I did enjoy foie gras until about 5 years ago when I witnessed jars and jars of enlarged livers at a shop in Nice. Super Size Me and Fast Food Nation opened my eyes to the evils of the fast food industry, and as an environmentalist who's always looking for something else to do, I was very interested in the cost of raising meat to our environment. I started replacing the protein dishes that I was used to all my life for vegetables with a side of tofu, but I was definitely still eating meat. I only started listening to your podcast to get some more vegetarian dish ideas, but instead you opened my eyes and mind. I had no idea the demise of male baby chicks or the conditions at slaughterhouses. I didn't know any of this. Of course, I started listening to your podcast 3 weeks before a trip to Prague and Budapest. I thought about waiting until I got back to start totally eliminating meat from my diet, my many excuses including it's so hard to read a Hungarian menu, they won't offer me any vegetarian food, etc. But something you said about doing something rather than nothing made me think. My master plan was to eliminate meat from my diet for 3 weeks, fall off the wagon and eat meat in Europe, and then come back and eat a plant-based diet again. But it only takes 3 weeks to change a habit. It was so easy being vegetarian in Europe. Almost every menu had a vegetarian section with wonderful foods to choose from, and the wait staff was always accommodating. I did not have any excuses, and though as a newbie I messed up a couple times, almost all of my meals were vegetarian or vegan. I had a wonderful vacation with lots of energy and a clear mind. On the train from Prague to Budapest, I listened to 6 hours of your podcast, and now I'm completely up to date waiting for your next one. I am just so amazed by all of you. I can't stand it. It's just, you're so amazing. So I thought I would just share that with you because I thought that was pretty neat. I mean, finally, the last thing I would say is in terms of difficulty, I would say that probably a tour package or a cruise or staying at some kind of resort would probably be the most difficult situation. But honestly, I think if you just talk to the kitchen staff and talk to the chef, talk to the organizers beforehand, I think it would really be worth the trouble to do that. So I have nothing else to say. I can't believe it. This is such a long episode. I'm so sorry. I really want to just pack everything I can. I should probably break these episodes up more, but it's another long one and they just keep getting longer. I'm going to try to keep them in check. But I'm really excited we now have a way to help all of you connect with the message board. And I have to say that I wouldn't have done this a few years ago just on I didn't do this a few years ago. I haven't done this at all on my website on purpose because I've seen way too many message boards and forums get really nasty and bogged down in nonsense. And being the control freak that I am, I just didn't want to create something that would potentially become that. But honestly, from the thousands of listeners I have already heard from, I'm confident this won't happen with our message board. Because you have got to be the most open-hearted, open-minded, authentic, compassionate, intelligent group of people I've ever encountered. And I'm so proud of all of you. You're doing it. You're living lives of integrity and consistency and compassion and showing the world that this is what being awake and alive is all about. And as you travel within and beyond your comfort zones, may you find reflected back at you the same abundance that you are giving to the world. I'm very grateful to be joining you on this journey, and I wish you the very best in all of your travels. For the animals, this is Colleen with Compassionate Cooks. Thanks for listening.